The grand ballroom of Ashford House glittered beneath hundreds of crystal chandeliers. Golden candlelight reflected from polished marble floors, illuminating the elegant gowns and tailored coats of London's highest nobility. Music drifted through the air as couples danced gracefully across the room, their laughter blending with the melody of violins. Yet amidst all the splendor, one woman stood alone. Duchess Eleanor Ashford rested a gloved hand against the balcony railing overlooking the ballroom. Her silver-blue gown shimmered beautifully beneath the lights, and diamonds sparkled at her throat. To anyone watching, she appeared every bit the perfect duchess. But appearances were deceiving. Her gaze wandered across the crowded room until it settled on her husband. Duke Sebastian Ashford stood near the fireplace, surrounded by influential politicians, businessmen, and noblemen. Tall and commanding, he carried himself with the effortless authority that had made him one of the most respected men in England. He looked handsome as always, cold as always. Eleanor watched him laugh politely at something one of the ministers said. For a brief moment, she hoped he might glance toward her. He didn't, not once. A familiar ache settled inside her chest. 3 years ago, she would have crossed the ballroom immediately. She would have found some excuse to join the conversation, desperate for even a few moments of his attention. Now she remained where she was. Experience had taught her better. Duchess Ashford. Eleanor turned as an elderly countess approached her with a sympathetic smile. "You look lovely this evening." "Thank you, Lady Pembroke." The older woman hesitated before speaking carefully. "Will His Grace not be joining you for the dance?" Eleanor followed the countess's gaze toward Sebastian. "He is busy." The countess nodded knowingly. Everyone knew. The entire aristocracy knew about the strange marriage between the Duke and Duchess of Ashford. There were no scandals, no public arguments, no affairs, only distance. A distance so vast that it had become impossible to ignore. The countess offered a gentle smile before moving away. Eleanor remained alone. Again, as the orchestra began another waltz, memories surfaced uninvited. She remembered the day she first met Sebastian. She had been 19. He had seemed larger than life, a war hero, a respected duke, a man whose name carried influence in every corner of England. While other young ladies admired him from afar, Eleanor had fallen deeply and completely in love. She remembered every conversation, every smile, every stolen glance. When he proposed marriage a year later, she had believed herself the luckiest woman in England. Only after the wedding had she learned the truth. Sebastian respected her. He admired her intelligence. He trusted her judgment. But he did not love her, not the way she loved him. At first, she convinced herself that love would come with time. She had tried everything. She organized dinners for just the two of them. She learned about politics so she could participate in his discussions. She sat beside him for hours while he worked. She remembered every detail about his interests and responsibilities. Whenever he returned home exhausted, she greeted him with warmth and patience. For a while, she believed her efforts were working. Then reality slowly revealed itself. Each year, Sebastian became more consumed by his responsibilities. Parliament, business investments, estate management, social obligations. His days grew longer, his conversations shorter, his attention drifted elsewhere. And somehow, despite living beneath the same roof, they became strangers. Months passed without meaningful conversations. Weeks passed without shared meals. Sometimes Eleanor would wake in the morning and realize she had not seen her husband properly in several days. The loneliness had become unbearable. At first she fought against it. Then she accepted it. And eventually, she grew tired. Tired of hoping. Tired of waiting. Tired of loving someone who never seemed to notice. The orchestra's final notes pulled her back to the present. Across the ballroom, Sebastian was already engaged in another conversation. He looked perfectly content, as though nothing was missing, as though she was not missing. Something inside her hardened. Not anger, not bitterness, simply resignation. For years, she had devoted herself entirely to her marriage. And for years, she had received almost nothing in return. Perhaps it was time to stop trying. The realization arrived quietly. No dramatic heartbreak. No tears. Only exhaustion. A person could carry hope for only so long before it became too heavy. That evening, Eleanor left the ball early. Sebastian never noticed. Over the following months, subtle changes began to appear. Eleanor stopped waiting for her husband at dinner. She stopped asking whether he would accompany her to social events. She stopped leaving invitations on his desk, stopped writing little notes, stopped searching for opportunities to spend time together. At first, Sebastian appeared not to notice. His routine remained unchanged. Meetings, travel, estate business, political discussions. The world continued revolving around him exactly as it always had. Meanwhile, Eleanor slowly rediscovered parts of herself she had abandoned. She began reading novels again. She resumed painting. She spent afternoons riding through the countryside. She visited charitable organizations throughout London. For the first time in years, her life no longer revolved entirely around her husband. The change was surprisingly freeing. There were still moments when loneliness crept in, still nights when she stared at the empty side of her bed, still mornings when she wondered what it might feel like to be truly loved. But those moments grew less frequent. She was learning how to exist without expecting anything from Sebastian. One sunny afternoon, nearly 6 months after that ballroom evening, Eleanor attended a garden party hosted by the Marchioness of Westwood. The estate gardens stretched across acres of vibrant flowers and manicured hedges. Guests wandered between marble fountains while musicians performed soft melodies beneath white pavilions. For once, Eleanor genuinely looked forward to the event, not because she expected anything special, simply because she enjoyed being around people who actually spoke to her. She was admiring a bed of roses when a warm male voice interrupted her thoughts. Those flowers seemed to have completely captured your attention. Eleanor turned. A gentleman stood nearby, smiling. He appeared to be in his early 30s, with kind eyes and an easy confidence that immediately put people at ease. She recognized him at once. Lord Nathaniel Harrington, a respected nobleman known for his intelligence and good nature. Eleanor smiled politely. "They're beautiful." "They are," he agreed, "though I suspect they're receiving unfair competition today." She laughed softly. The compliment was charming rather than inappropriate. Nathaniel seemed pleased by her reaction. For the next several minutes, they discussed the gardens, literature, and travel. The conversation flowed effortlessly. There was no awkwardness, no forced politeness. Most surprisingly, Nathaniel listened, truly listened. When Eleanor spoke, he paid attention. When she expressed an opinion, he valued it. When she laughed, he smiled. It felt strangely unfamiliar and wonderfully refreshing. As the afternoon sun cast golden light across the gardens, Eleanor realized she had enjoyed herself more during this brief conversation than she had during countless social events over the past year. For the first time in months, genuine happiness touched her face. A real smile, bright, natural, unforced, and somewhere across the garden, entirely unnoticed by her, the first chapter of a much larger story had quietly begun. The weeks following the garden party passed more pleasantly than Eleanor could remember in years. What had begun as a simple conversation among roses soon became a familiar friendship. Lord Nathaniel Harrington appeared at many of the same social gatherings Eleanor attended. Whether at charity events, musical evenings, art exhibitions, or countryside picnics, they frequently found themselves in conversation. Nathaniel possessed a rare gift. He made people feel important. When Eleanor spoke, he listened with genuine interest. He asked thoughtful questions. He remembered details from previous conversations. Most importantly, he never treated her as merely the Duchess of Ashford. He treated her as Eleanor. For so long she had felt invisible within her own marriage that such simple kindness felt extraordinary. One afternoon, during a charity luncheon, they discussed their favorite books. Another evening, they debated politics during a dinner hosted by a viscount. At a summer concert, they laughed together over a musician who repeatedly forgot his place in the performance. The friendship remained entirely proper. Nathaniel never crossed a line, never flirted openly, never behaved in a manner that could compromise her reputation. Yet despite that, people noticed. High society always noticed, and high society loved gossip. Soon whispers began circulating through London's drawing rooms. The Duchess seems quite happy these days. Have you seen her with Lord Harrington? They spent a remarkable amount of time together. It is pleasant to see her smiling again. Some comments were harmless. Others were less charitable. But regardless of their intentions, the rumors spread. And eventually, they reached Sebastian Ashford. The Duke sat in his study one afternoon reviewing estate accounts when an old friend casually mentioned Nathaniel's name. "I saw your wife at Lady Whitmore's reception." Sebastian barely looked up. "Did you?" She seemed quite entertained. His friend smirked. Lord Harrington hardly left her side. Sebastian's pen paused. Only briefly. Then he continued writing. "I'm sure it was innocent." "Of course." The man chuckled. Still, the entire ballroom was talking about them. Sebastian dismissed the comment. He trusted Eleanor completely. She was honorable, loyal, far too principled to engage in anything improper. The gossip meant nothing. At least that was what he told himself. Yet strangely, the conversation lingered in his mind long after his friend departed. For reasons he couldn't explain, the mention of Nathaniel Harrington irritated him. Weeks later, another comment surfaced. Then another. Then another. Everywhere he went, someone seemed eager to mention Lord Harrington and the Duchess. At first, Sebastian ignored it. Then he became annoyed. Eventually, he became curious. Curiosity led to observation, and observation led to discomfort. He began noticing how often Nathaniel's name appeared in conversation, how frequently Eleanor attended events where Nathaniel was present, how easily she smiled whenever people mentioned him. A feeling he had never experienced before slowly emerged. Jealousy. The realization disturbed him. It made no sense. For years, he had encouraged Eleanor to maintain friendships and social connections. Why should this friendship be different? Why should one gentleman's presence bother him? It did, more than he cared to admit. The answer arrived unexpectedly at a grand country gathering hosted by the Earl of Blackwood. The estate was magnificent. Guests wandered across sprawling gardens, participated in outdoor games, and enjoyed elaborate meals beneath enormous white tents. Sebastian attended reluctantly. Political obligations required his presence. His intention was to stay briefly and leave. Then he heard her laugh. The sound drifted across the garden. Light, warm, joyful. It stopped him instantly, because he recognized the laugh, and because he hadn't heard it in years. His gaze moved toward the source. There, beneath a large oak tree, sat Eleanor and Nathaniel. Several guests surrounded them, but Eleanor's attention was focused entirely on Nathaniel. He was telling a story. Everyone appeared amused, but Eleanor was radiant. Her eyes sparkled. Her shoulders were relaxed. Her smile was effortless. For a moment, Sebastian simply stared. A strange heaviness settled in his chest. He couldn't remember the last time he had seen her look like that. Had she ever looked like that with him? The question struck harder than expected, because once upon a time, she had. Years ago, before disappointment replaced hope, before silence replaced conversation, before neglect became routine, Sebastian suddenly remembered countless evenings when Eleanor had tried to engage him, countless invitations he declined, countless conversations he cut short, countless opportunities he ignored. The memories arrived one after another, and none of them painted him favorably. Across the lawn, Eleanor laughed again. Nathaniel smiled at something she said. The sight twisted something inside Sebastian. He disliked it, disliked how comfortable they appeared, disliked how naturally they interacted, disliked how easily Nathaniel accomplished what he himself had failed to do. Make Eleanor happy. The realization followed immediately, and it shattered him. Nathaniel wasn't taking something from him. Nathaniel was simply appreciating something Sebastian had neglected. For the remainder of the afternoon, Sebastian found himself watching them. Every smile, every conversation, every shared laugh. The more he observed, the worse he felt. Not because he suspected wrongdoing, but because he recognized the truth. Eleanor wasn't falling in love with another man. She was simply enjoying the attention and respect she should have received from her husband. That realization was infinitely more painful. Days later, the tension finally reached its breaking point. Sebastian returned home unusually early. As he entered the library, he discovered Eleanor reading near the fireplace. She looked peaceful, content, almost happier than he had seen her in years. The sight should have pleased him. Instead, it intensified the turmoil already brewing inside him. Eleanor. She looked up. Sebastian. A brief silence followed. Then he spoke. I heard you attended the Whitmore reception. I did. With Lord Harrington. Her expression remained calm. Among many others, yes. Something sharp entered his voice. You seem to spend a considerable amount of time together. Eleanor closed her book slowly. The movement was deliberate. Measured. I suppose we do. And what exactly does he provide that others do not? The moment the words left his mouth, he regretted them. But it was too late. Eleanor stared at him quietly. Then she answered. The honesty in her voice was devastating. He listens. Sebastian felt as though the air had been knocked from his lungs. Eleanor continued. He asks about my thoughts. Her gaze never left his. He remembers things I tell him. Every sentence landed like a blow. And when I speak, he makes me feel as though I matter. Silence filled the room. The fire crackled softly between them. For the first time in years, Sebastian truly looked at his wife. Really looked at her. And what he saw broke his heart. Not anger. Not resentment. Not bitterness. Only exhaustion. The exhaustion of a woman who had spent years trying to be loved. Years trying to be seen. Years trying to matter. Before he could respond, Eleanor spoke again. Her voice was gentle, which somehow hurt even more. I spent a long time feeling invisible, Sebastian. The confession struck him harder than any accusation ever could, because it was true, and they both knew it. Eleanor stood and placed her book upon the table. For a moment, she looked as though she wanted to say something more. Instead, she simply offered a sad smile. Then she left the room. Sebastian remained standing beside the fireplace. Alone, silent, broken by a truth he could no longer avoid. For the first time since their marriage began, the Duke of Ashford understood something terrifying. He had not lost Eleanor in a single moment. He had been losing her for years. And now, for the first time, he feared he might already be too late. For the first time in many years, Sebastian Ashford could not escape his own thoughts. The conversation in the library haunted him. I spent a long time feeling invisible, Sebastian. Those words followed him everywhere. Into his study, into Parliament meetings, into sleepless nights that stretched endlessly toward dawn. He had spent years believing he was fulfilling his duties as a husband simply by providing security, wealth, and respectability. Now he understood how terribly wrong he had been. A marriage could survive without luxury, without influence, without grand estates, but it could not survive without attention, without affection, without love. One rainy evening, unable to rest, Sebastian wandered into a rarely used sitting room. Inside, he discovered a small wooden chest. It belonged to Eleanor. He recognized it immediately. Years ago, she had often kept personal mementos inside. The chest was slightly open. Curiosity drew him closer. He knew he should leave. Instead, he lifted the lid. Inside were dozens of carefully preserved memories. Letters, pressed flowers, small keepsakes. The earliest letter was written shortly before their wedding. Sebastian unfolded it carefully. His chest tightened as he read. Every page overflowed with hope. Hope for their future. Hope for their marriage. Hope for the family they might build together. There were dozens more. Letters Eleanor had written but never given him. Pages filled with dreams, fears, and quiet expressions of love. As Sebastian read through them, guilt settled heavily upon him. The woman he had neglected had loved him with her entire heart, and he had barely noticed. Hours passed before he finally closed the chest. When he looked up, dawn light was beginning to creep through the windows. For the first time in years, Sebastian cried. Not loudly, not dramatically, just a few quiet tears for everything he had taken for granted, everything he had failed to see, and everything he nearly lost. The next morning, Sebastian made a decision. If he wanted Eleanor's forgiveness, words would never be enough. He would have to prove he had changed. not through grand gestures, through consistent actions. The first step was simple. He joined her for breakfast. Eleanor looked visibly surprised when he entered the dining room. "Good morning." "Good morning," she replied cautiously. The meal felt awkward. Years of distance could not disappear overnight. Still, Sebastian remained. He asked about her plans. He listened carefully to her answers. When she spoke about a charity project she was supporting, he paid attention. A small thing. It's something he had not done in years. The following day, he did again. And the day after that. Weeks passed. Slowly, Sebastian began rearranging his priorities. He delegated unnecessary responsibilities, reduced travel whenever possible, spent more evenings at home. Instead of burying himself in paperwork, he sat with Eleanor in the library. Sometimes they spoke. Sometimes they simply shared comfortable silence. Neither felt pressured. Both were learning how to exist together again. One afternoon, while walking through the estate gardens, Sebastian finally offered the apology he should have given years ago. "Eleanor." She glanced toward him. "I am sorry." She said nothing. So he continued. "For all of it." His voice shook slightly. "For every dinner I missed. Another step along the garden path. For every conversation I ignored. A pause. For every moment I made you feel unimportant." Eleanor stopped walking. Sebastian turned toward her. There was no defensiveness left in him. No pride. Only honesty. "You deserve far better than the husband I have been." For a long moment, she simply looked at him. Then she nodded. Not forgiveness. Not yet. But acknowledgement. And for now, that was enough. Meanwhile, Lord Nathaniel Harrington quietly observed the changes taking place. He noticed how often Sebastian accompanied Eleanor, how their conversations gradually became more natural, how the distance between them slowly narrowed. Most importantly, he noticed something Eleanor herself had not fully realized. Despite everything, part of her still loved her husband. One evening, Nathaniel requested a private conversation with her. They met in the conservatory where sunlight filtered through towering glass walls. "I have accepted a diplomatic appointment in Vienna," he told her. Eleanor smiled warmly. "Congratulations." "Thank you." A brief silence followed. Then Nathaniel spoke carefully. "You know, when we first became friends, I admired your strength." She laughed softly. "Strength?" "Yes." His expression grew thoughtful. "You survived loneliness that would have broken many people." Eleanor looked away. Nathaniel continued. "But I think you've been waiting for something." She knew exactly what he meant. "Perhaps." His smile was gentle. "You should choose the future that makes you happiest." Before she could respond, he added quietly, "And I suspect you already know what that future is." Several days later, Nathaniel departed for Vienna. Eleanor watched his carriage disappear down the road. She felt sadness, but not heartbreak, because somewhere along the way, she had realized Nathaniel was never the love story. He had simply reminded her what kindness looked like. Autumn arrived. With it came one of the grandest social events of the season. Hundreds of nobles gathered inside a magnificent ballroom illuminated by crystal chandeliers. Music echoed across polished marble floors. The atmosphere buzzed with excitement. Eleanor stood near the center of the room, speaking with guests. Then suddenly the conversations around her began to quiet. She turned. Sebastian was approaching. Tall, confident, determined. The crowd instinctively parted. He stopped directly before her. Every eye in the ballroom focused on them. Eleanor. She looked up. Sebastian. His expression softened. Then, before all of high society, he spoke words nobody expected, including her. For years, I believed duty was enough. The ballroom fell silent. I believed providing for my wife was the same as loving her. Pain flickered across his features. I was wrong. Guests exchanged astonished glances. Sebastian never looked away from Eleanor. I spent years taking your love for granted. His voice grew stronger. And it was only when I saw another man make you smile that I realized how blind I had been. Emotion filled the room. Some guests appeared stunned. Others visibly moved. But Sebastian noticed none of them. Only Eleanor. You gave me your heart. A pause. I nearly destroyed it. Tears shimmered in Eleanor's eyes. Sebastian extended his hand. Not as a duke. Not as a powerful nobleman. simply as a husband. As long as I live, I will spend every day proving that I am worthy of the love I almost lost. The room remained completely silent. Waiting, watching, Eleanor stared at him, at the man who had once ignored her, at the man who now stood before her with humility she had never seen before. Most importantly, she saw change. Real change. Not promises. Not guilt. Change. Slowly, she placed her hand in his. A collective breath swept through the ballroom. Relief flooded Sebastian's face. The orchestra began playing once more. He led her onto the dance floor. For the first time in their marriage, they danced not as strangers fulfilling social expectations, but as two people choosing each other. 6 months later, spring returned to Ashford Estate. The gardens bloomed with color. Birds sang from flowering trees. Sebastian and Eleanor walked together along a winding path. The world felt different now. Lighter, warmer, peaceful. Sebastian told a ridiculous story about a disastrous political meeting. Eleanor laughed. A genuine, beautiful laugh. The same laugh that had once shattered him. This time, however, he was the reason for it. He smiled. She smiled back. And as they continued walking hand in hand beneath the spring sunshine, Sebastian finally understood the lesson that had nearly cost him everything. Love was not something guaranteed by vows. It was something that required attention, effort, presence, every single day. Fortunately, he had learned that lesson before it was too late. And this time, he intended to spend the rest of his life proving it.